to ZIZ. I'm Eboni Brandon. Very happy to be here this evening. Today we would have heard a complete breakdown of the 2026 budget and estimates of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis presented by the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Terrance. We thought here at ZIZ that it would be a very useful thing to do to have a conversation really about how our budgets in St. Kitts and Nevis are prepared. What goes into the consideration of a budget? We would have seen the National Budget Forum just a few weeks ago. I was happy to be there and participate in that program, but there is so much more to it. And the numbers as well can be confusing when we hear these large numbers. So I think that we have put together a panel this evening that is very learned, very informed, and who can provide us with the insight to some of the questions that we have here in St. Kitts and Nevis with respect to the budget that was presented in the National Assembly today. I'm really pleased to welcome to the panel this evening of this budget analysis our former Minister of Education in St. Kitts and Nevis and current Digital Transformation Officer, Nigel Carty. And as the Prime Minister says, once honorable, always honorable. And we also have with us another person who is always honorable, will continue to remain honorable, our former Minister of Tourism, Ricky Skerritt. He has agreed to join us here this evening to offer some insight as well into the process. And what makes this all the more important as we have this conversation this evening is that these gentlemen would have sat in our cabinets in the past, and so they have insider information that we don't have as members of the public and members of the media as to what goes into really making sure that a budget that is presented to the country is one that we can live with over 12 months. And more than this, these are numbers that have real consequences for us as a nation. And so we are going to delve into that conversation right now. I think I want to start with Mr. Carty this evening, welcoming you to the panel and just any opening remarks. We had a long day today, about 4 hours of presentation by the Prime Minister where he would present the 2026 budget. What was your take on it this morning?
Good evening to the listening and viewing audience. I'm very happy to be here, Ebony, alongside my colleague, Ricky Skerritt. I did think that the presentation was a very measured, future-oriented, balanced approach to the fiscal affairs of the government. I think one of the things that the government continues to speak about is the need for sustainability. And that means a lot of things, but in the context of the budget, I think it means making sure that we can live within our means. Government has to be able to maintain programs that it introduces. I know it's very, everybody wants social programs. Everybody wants everything, roads, water, electricity, and so on. But it's critically important that we understand that whatever the government does has to be sustainable in the long run. We have to be able to maintain what we implement, otherwise it would be like taking one step forward, one step backward, or maybe 2 steps backward even. So I think that the budget that was presented was one that engaged or required deep reflection on the part of the government as to how it's going to move forward the country within the context of the constraints that exist. And at the same time, having regard to the goals and objectives, the aspirations of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. So I do think that it was a well-presented budget, both in substance and style.
Well, Mr. Skerritt, what about you? I thought it was a very realistic budget in that we look at the fact that we are facing a declining citizenship by investment. We have some challenges there and we're not making the robust amounts we used to make in the lab. A realistic budget, what did you think about it?
Well, first of all, let me say good night. It's an opportunity to join this discussion. It's a pleasure for me and an honor. I looked at, I had the time today to look at the entire budget address. And one of the things that struck me was the Prime Minister was in good form today. You know, I thought to myself, you know, he's batting like a serious statesman. He's young and inexperienced, but he was showing a kind of maturity and a kind of intimacy with the budget. Very lengthy budget addresses, you know. It was his address. It wasn't, you know, it was clearly an input from many, many different stakeholders, as we know. You said it earlier that you had been in a forum, at least one forum, where he had been seeking inputs. Well, I think this budget is the most sounded budget forever that I've ever seen. It had more discussions and inputs and more consultations perhaps than any budget has ever had. And this is a good thing, but it is time consuming, and it is brings a lot of things to the table at the last minute. But I want to take the opportunity to congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister, because he showed today the benefit of going out to the people and getting the feedback, because it gave him a certain confidence and a certain intimacy, is this word I used before, and it became his budget. It's a budget that feeds into all the programs of he and his colleagues, but you could see that it was a very considerate and thoughtful presentation. And you know, the key thing is, how do we get enough money? It was a deficit budget.
Yes, it was.
It was showing that we didn't get the amount of money that we had hoped to get in 2025. So the question is, will we get that makeup in 26? Well, he showed tremendous confidence. He didn't bat an eyelid about it. He didn't look worried in any way. And he was very, I would think, very assertive in putting his presentation forward.
You know, when we hear about a deficit, it's something that's always taken in a sort of panic, and we're afraid, and it is a sign that the government is floundering or not doing well. But when we look at the global economic situation over the last year, we don't even have to go further than that. We can see that St. Kitts and Nevis is not really in a unique situation, is it?
No, St. Kitts and Nevis is not in a unique position with respect to this. One would prefer not to have a deficit budget, but the reality is sometimes, just like our homes have to run deficits, we have to go to a bank, get money to buy a car, to do something, piece of furniture, whatever have you. The same thing has to happen from time to time. The fact is, there is a projection of economic growth of about 2-3% in the ensuing years that would serve us well. And I'm trusting that we'll also have a slight rebound. The Prime Minister did speak to some measure of rebound in the CBI program. That's a program we have maybe over-depended on over the last many years, but I think we now have to adjust ourselves and recognize that we're not ever perhaps going to get back to those days when we made all these millions of dollars from that program. So we have to hope that that improves, and that we understand and appreciate the need for us to kind of live within our means from a national or fiscal perspective.
I think just as a continuation of that, I think one of the things that the deficit for this past year would have done is it would have brought some sense of reality check to exactly what we can anticipate for a program, which, as the Prime Minister himself says all the time, we really do not control in its entirety. It is a very important program. It has been tremendously important to the country. It has brought some really positive input to development projects and programs and to empowerment of people. But I think the cutback in the estimates for next year are going to end up being a good thing, because I think we will exceed what is being anticipated for next year, and that will help to fund some of the deficit from this year. What will also be important is to note, Prime Minister was very adamant on we're going out to collect monies due to us. Business people, other business associates, private vendors, all sizes and shapes of business people take advantage of government whenever they can. Mm-hmm. They are consumers. We don't pay our bills except we have to, at least some of us. And there comes a time when the government has to rally its forces, its troops, and say, let's go collect what is ours. Let's go get what belongs to Caesar, you know. And so the government, the Prime Minister could easily have said as Minister of Finance, look, we're going to explore some new taxes next year to make up for the losses this year. Mm-hmm. And I want to commend him for not doing that for two reasons. One, first of all, there is a significant amount of debt out there debtors that owe the government, just like the government owes banks and so on. If the government doesn't collect what belongs to it, it's going to be running into trouble with being able to pay its own obligations. But the other thing about next year is that if you look at all of the capital projects that were mentioned and the kind of private sector activity that's taken place, and we could try to go through some of them later, Eboni, the Prime Minister is showing great confidence in next year. You could almost see him grinning with pleasure and excitement every time he spoke about 2026. And I hope that will actually come to pass.
And it's really easy to sit and say, as we talk about a deficit budget, but we have to look at some of the causes for it. We already touched on one, which is the Citizenship by Investment program and the decline there. It's a decline that's been across the Caribbean. One of the things I noticed that he mentioned at least twice in his presentation this morning was the Estridge Prison Project, without delving too much into the politics of it, because there's always that to discuss. He believes strongly that project and how it was managed is part of the reason why the Citizenship by Investment program floundered. In addition to which, we have to look at the shares it was given, about 5,500 shares, I believe, which today, I think, for the first time we heard, was worth somewhere in the region of 25,000 citizenships. He called that figure in the National Assembly today.
He did.
What would that do from your understanding of how the Citizenship by Investment works to a country's program?
Right. I think you made a very important point, Eboni. One of the issues, one of the problems we have experienced with our CBI program is that the program has been very poorly managed, particularly by the last government. Yes, there have been challenges in the past prior to the last administration, but I think things took a turn for the worse. In fact, things went to rock bottom under the previous administration. In fact, I think many of you would recall that one of the straws that broke the camel's back with respect to the previous administration, why eventually Matt Brantley and Sean Richards left, was the same prison project. I can remember distinctly once the government had broken up and Sean Richards was out there in the opposition, he made an effort to visit the prison project over in Estridge. I know he was prevented from getting very close to the project, but the project really served to undermine the CBI program in a very, very big way. What that does, it causes governments with which we have relationships, such as governments or countries where our people want to travel without visas, or countries where our citizens have easy access, even if they have to have visas. It causes those countries to begin to think that things are not any longer under control in St. Kitts and Nevis, that all sorts of people, criminals here and there and everywhere, are going to be getting access to our passport, and thus allowing them, just as native-born citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, to enter into those jurisdictions. So they become defensive, they recluse, and so it becomes very difficult for us to manage the program in that way. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, and I think the government has done a lot of work in making sure that our partners around the world understand that we are building on the quality of the program. One of the things I understand that the government has been attempting to do is to, or at least been asked to do, I'm not certain whether it will happen, is to maybe think about including what we call a residency element to the program. That is going to make it a lot more difficult for some of our citizens by investment to get on board, but maybe it's the way we have to go to build back confidence with a lot of people around the world. But the other point I want to make is that one of the things that we have to recall and remember is that when the Labour Party under Denzel Douglas would have left office and left about $950 million in the bank, that was money that should have gone into what we call a sovereign wealth fund. So all this time we are floundering, trying to find money to keep some of these social programs that we introduced afloat, or at least keep them as policy options going forward. I think that the abuse of those funds has really put us in a bind long-termly, and I would hope to God that going forward, once we get our feet back under us from the standpoint of the CBI program, that will take seriously making sure that we create a fund that is protected under some law or even perhaps the Constitution.
And I know there has been talk of a sovereign wealth fund. But we also look at this, Mrs. Skerritt, from your position as a former Minister of Tourism, you really understand how these situations can have impact even reaching into that, because we're talking about diversifying the economy to be less reliant on that. But then we have all major markets, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and they perhaps, I don't know, put out advisories about us in the region based on the dynamics taking place with these issues with CBI and so on. How does that impact even our ability to diversify our economy and to look to other markets for revenue?
The problem wasn't a significant problem didn't occur which related to advisories being given. What really messed up tourism here and set us back considerably is a matter that is often addressed by the Prime Minister, including today, where he speaks again and again. And I think it's so important that he keeps making a point that because of the political motive of holding back the country from reopening post-pandemic, tourism needs a certain lead time to begin to sell programs and tours and so on. And in the case of cruise ships, schedules and hotels and so on. It's a very complex issue how to get people into your business from thousands of miles away. It takes a tremendous amount of strategic planning and detailed logistics. And when you hold back a country from being open to the world and getting lead time to advertise that you're open for business, you set back the industry quite a bit, and you miss almost a year or two in terms of momentum. One of the key things that the Prime Minister said today was that tourism performance, stay-over visitors, and cruise passengers had arrived at pre-COVID levels since in October. Now that is a tremendous achievement. In other words, we can say St. Kitts and Nevis is on the way back and beyond the 2019 performance, which was the best year in history. So when you add on what's going to be taking place this month, December, which is our busiest month, St. Kitts and Nevis are on the way back to glory, so to speak, in terms of tourism. He also went to great lengths to speak about an area of the economy which the outlook had begun with the Christophe Harbour Marina and the private jet terminal, trying to lift the level of expenditure of our visitors with private jets and mega yachts, the largest yachts. Marina built specially to the only dedicated marina in the Caribbean for those largest yachts. And that is showing great signs with the sale recently of the Christophe Harbour Marina to an international safe harbor, a really successfully large international company that is going to be spending large sums of investment. So tourism is on the way back. And Ross University, if I dare call their name, that's a very important source of what we call the more medium-term visitors, students and faculty and staff. They are back to their optimum levels, having themselves been hurt badly by the pandemic. A neighboring medical school and other what we call education tourism entities will all be back at their best in 2026. So I am not terribly worried about the Citizenship by Investment Program. I think the reality checks have been received. The government has gone through a tremendous reorganization. What that reorganization, as necessary as it was a little bit spaced out, and it created some uncertainty in the market. So people who were looking to do business with St. Kitts sort of sat back to wait and see. We had to do what we had to do. It was unprecedented. Did we do it as fast and as effective as it could have been? Perhaps not, but we did a pretty decent job getting it to where it is today. And where it is today is going to achieve a growth again. And I think you will see that program. It will never go back to what it used to be pre the abuse of it in the recent times, but it will definitely continue to fund that huge component of social programs that are so important to the Labour Party philosophy and the way in which we go about doing business, which is to take care of the people who need us, take care of the needy, not the greedy. It's that is so important to the use of that fund, because without that fund, we cannot sustain the 30 to 35% of our budget into social programs.
It makes a lot of sense. So let me ask the big question that everybody has been talking about. We were wondering if we were going to have a quote-unquote double salary this year. And at the very end of the budget, the Prime Minister said, yes, there's going to be a payment, but it's not going to be like in years past because the ministers and the advisors will take a cut. I don't know who would have been disappointed by hearing that, but I think most of the public would have been glad to hear. But okay, we realize that we are a little tight this year, so somebody is taking a step back. How do you feel about that, especially when we consider that earlier this year in January, public servants, civil servants received, and not just civil servants, auxiliary workers as well, they received a 8.5% increase.
Yeah.
There has never in the history of St. Kitts and Nevis been a double salary in a year where an increase was given.
Right. So again, we must commend the government and the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance in particular, for this. I think people have become so accustomed to the double salary, civil servants, and of course businesses as well, depend on and expect government to give civil servants double salary so that they can get more expenditure, you know, in their stores, their shops, etc., etc. So it has become part of the expectation. I don't know though if this can continue ad infinitum, but certainly the government wanted to demonstrate that it understands that people are feeling the squeeze and wanted to provide a relief for them. And this, of course, is very much welcome. With respect to ministers not getting an increase, I think that is also a wise decision that has been made by the government. Not that overall it's going to make a big impact in terms of the expenditure and so on, but it does demonstrate that the government thinks about the need to cut back on expenditure.
Because if I'm making high 4 figures, I'll maybe low 5 figures. I mean, come on. How can I begrudge somebody who's making a little 2,000 or 3,000 a month, right?
Absolutely.
I think what was what was exciting about the double salary announcement today was the way in which it was done.
Right.
I thought the Prime Minister was very mischievous and very politically astute in the way in which he brought the envelope, received an envelope with a statement in it which speaks to, I don't recall that ever happening before.
Dramatic. Yeah.
And what made it special was that there was this perception out there in his critics and opponents that the government can't afford to do it. And they were just waiting for the budget address to finish without any sort of special Santa Claus, and to jump all over him and say, aha, you see there? He don't know how to lead us economically and financially and so on. Well, so much for that.
Christmas come early.
I want to say that the way in which it was done, the presentation, pulling the decision makers out of it, because one of the things about government that the critics say is that the decision makers take care of themselves. Well, clearly that doesn't happen all the time, because if that happened, that you would have seen everybody would have got today. But this was a way for the Prime Minister to say, look, we really don't have the kinds of reserves that we need to have, but we believe the people deserve, and therefore we are going to do. But we, the better paid ones in the government, we are going to take a back seat on this. And I think that was a very noble approach to the situation.
I agree with that. Overall, when we look at the budget this year, the tone of the budget and the setup for the debate that will take place over the course of the week, what do we feel about this government from first budget to now? we're looking at the budget presentation in 2026, are we seeing any growth in terms of, because you said so earlier, it's a new administration, many of them, I think the only person who would have served in government before is Senior Minister Douglas. What do you think about the growth and maturity of this administration, despite the disgruntlement? Because let's be real, there is disgruntlement and people are murmuring. Last night there was an accident in Lodge, and there was a gentleman there saying it's Dr. Jufal, the accident took place. I'm trying to figure out how. He wasn't there, he wasn't in the car.
Yeah.
But this is the sort of thing that's said from time to time. When we look at it objectively, what is the maturity and what is the growth, if any, we're seeing from this administration?
Right. You told that joke. People can become cynical sometimes, and sometimes people just joke around with those things. But largely, I've seen tremendous growth in this government in the way it has presented this last budget. I think, first of all, there's a sense of realism. This budget is very realistic. The Prime Minister and Minister of Finance has been very forthright, in my view, in indicating to people where we are on the CBI, on our revenue collection, where we are in terms of the issues we're facing with respect to carrying forward some of our social programs, etc., etc. Critically important. But I think the government has also been careful to update people as to where we are on some of the critical projects. People have been hearing about the hospital project for quite some time. He has let the public know that this is still critically important as part of creating greater sustainability in our health sector and so forth, and other projects, the Basti High School and so forth. So I've seen a great deal of maturity with respect to the realism, the forthrightness, the ability to get an understanding in people's head as to what's happening with the government affairs.
And you spoke about the Prime Minister himself, his growth. What do you think about the overall growth of the administration?
Well, we will be in a better position to speak to that over the next few days as each minister and the opponents say what they have to say about this budget and about the funding and where it's going for what and so on. But I think, quite frankly, I have seen growth in every minister that I've had an opportunity to interact with. They're all very sensible, they're all bright, and they're all learning, and learning at a rapid rate. That's my opinion. I mean, everybody knows that I support the party in office, but I'm not saying that to get any favors. I'm saying it because I have observed it. I've told the Minister of Tourism that she's one of the fastest growing intellectually and academically of the tourism ministers I have known. And after a few months with her, she didn't need me anymore, quite frankly, and she has a very clear understanding of what the industry requires for its success, and she's setting about to bring change. It's not easy. Change is not change. Design and operationalizing the change is not easy. It takes experience, and these folks are generally inexperienced. But we put them there. We put them there because we wanted change. We put them there because we wanted new, more youthful, more energetic approaches to problem solving. And mistakes have been made and will be made again. But what you're seeing is a certain sense of inclusivity, a very strong inclusivity from most of them. Some of the look, who are your critics? Your critics are usually your opponents. That's why they're called opponents. That's why they're on the other side, because they want to get rid of you. They will even make up, what we call fake news. They will do anything, and as it gets closer to the election time, the budget becomes more and more, of a subject of debate. So I'm looking forward to this debate over the next few days, because the government has leverage now. This is really an excellent budget that gives the government ammunition to say, here's what we have successfully done so far, and here's what we are budgeting to achieve next year. It's there. It's there. One of the things, for instance, I mean, some of the reform that's taken place internally in government, most governments don't like it because it's costly, but it's not bringing new jobs. It's reorganizing the various ministries. Right? Nigel would be able to tell you about some of them, but one of the ones that I've been involved in is is the whole issue of price control. Sorry, not price control. Cost of living reduction. I happen to have had the privilege to sit on that particular committee with the chairman as the cabinet secretary, Dr. Natta, and he's been excellent. He's pulled together a group of bright young civil servants who have been working on a number of projects. And one of the projects is a survey of small and medium-sized business to find out how can government do better. Even though every government has listed small and medium enterprises as a key focus. This government is showing it more seriously than I've ever seen. And also the issue of trying to get the consumer price index to be more realistic, to be more pertinent, to be more usable, so that you can really measure price increases and other things or more accurately in a way that relates to people, not just some people, but to generally the whole community can say, well, this is what we are doing to minimize the growth of prices in the commercial sector and so on. So I think, I've seen in this budget and some of the exposure I've had by speaking to some people before that we are on the right path, and that I think all signs are leading in the right direction.
Fantastic. We're going to take a little bit of a break. When we get back, however, what I'd like us to take a turn to is look at some of the money spent versus what has been delivered over the past year, and see if we see any justification for some of the spending which would have taken place last year, and some of the cutback, because there is actually, when you look at the figures, a cutback in expenditure with regard to new capital projects. But we want to examine why this is the case. Is it because we have projects on the table to be taking place? What's going on? So we take a short break. We invite you to stay with us here on ZIZ. I'm here with Nigel Carty and Ricky Skerritt as we have an analysis and discussion about the 2026 budget and some of the matters arising from it. We'll be right back.
The clock is ticking. It's Hartsford's Building and Nevis Centers and Builders Paradise Christmas Countdown Sale. This Thursday, December 18 to that day, December 20. Enjoy 30% off store-wide all weekend. Plus 12% VAT on that day, Saturday, December 20 on everything you need before the holidays. Don't wait. Time is running out to save big before Christmas Day. Build with us at Hartsford's Building and Nevis Centers and get everyday low prices at Builders Paradise.
Ho, ho, ho! Scandus bringing holiday cheers, one clean space at a time. We take pride in offering a diverse range of services, including heavy equipment rental, solid waste management, and medical waste management. This holiday season, cleanup is made easy with our special discount on roll-off bins rental and private waste collection, available December 15th to the 30th. Join us for our Christmas Island Drive-Thru Haul-Away event on December 15th and the 19th. For more details, visit us at Scandus, located in Canada Industrial Estate, St. Kitts. We're open Monday to Saturday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Or call us at 662-3329 or 665-1003. Scandus, your partner for clean and efficient service.
Welcome back. I'm Eboni Brandon, and we're continuing our conversation here on ZIZ. We'd like to say a special good evening to those who are watching online, abroad, wherever you are. Welcome, as we have this very important conversation about our 2026 budget, which was announced in National Assembly today by Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Terrance. Here in the studio with me are Ricky Skerritt, our former Minister of Tourism. He is very important to us still, major regional sporting figure, and he plays a role in advising some of those people who are now learning what he has forgotten. We also have in the studio with us our former Minister of Education and Communication, our present Chief Digital Transformation Officer, Mr. Nigel Carty, as well, providing some insight into how we go about the formulation of our budget, some of the things that go into it, and exploring not just the 2026 budget, but comparing it against what was announced last year and whether or not we've seen any growth, any progress for our taxpayer dollars here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Very important. Right now, what we want to do, however, is have a conversation about some of the capital projects. The budget this year actually saw that there is a reduction in capital expenditure. In 2025, it was $209.4 million allocated for capital expenditure, as opposed to $167.2 million in the upcoming budget. One might ask, well, why do we have this great drawback? But when we look at what has taken place over the last year, in my opinion, we have a lot of things already underway, although they may not be going vertical as yet. Is that not so?
Yeah, we can talk about a number of projects. The hospital project, for example, a lot of the funding for that is in the works. That will be coming forward. Over the last year or two, a lot of preparatory work has been done, negotiating land, clearing land, doing the designs, getting approval for your EIA, which is your environmental impact assessment, and so forth. And it seems now that the government is just about on the cusp of breaking ground and beginning the construction. What I see for 2026 in terms of the hospital project is things taking off. Although we have had overall a decrease in the capital expenditure for 2026 as projected, I do believe that for what is intended to happen in 2026, we have the funding for that. And of course, if there's any need for any expenditure beyond what has been projected, just in case, for example, the pace of construction picks up to a point where more expenditure is needed in 2026, I believe that the wherewithal exists for those funds to be found and provided. Right? The Basti High School, I think we are aware that the previous government spent 7 years in office after having basically campaigned almost sold in the Basti High School, spent 7 years, spent over $30 million, and we have nothing to show for it. I think what we have seen under this government is real progress in terms of the construction of the school. So we've seen the designs, we've seen the clearing of the ground, in fact the demolition of the buildings that were existing, and now we're on the point of doing the construction. These things take a bit of a time to get started, but it shouldn't have taken 7 years, $30 million, 7 years, and nothing having happened.
Eboni, one of the, we spoke just before the break, we spoke about critics, and I said the critics of government are generally people in opposition, and their job is to criticize, and there's some people overdo it. But there are critics, and I must confess, there are some critics that I have heard who voted for the Labour Party administration and have been unhappy. What have they been unhappy about? Primarily that the government has not produced the capital projects as quickly as they had expected, and especially the project which was supposed to deliver 2,500 houses.
2,400 houses.
2,400, okay, 2,400 affordable homes. That was a project that unfortunately went astray, caught fire, so to speak, and a lot of people were a little bit upset, and the Prime Minister spoke to that today in terms of some lesser amount of houses, but the housing program has begun at a slower rate than had been anticipated. The Basti High School project, the hospital project, these are all projects that were campaigned on, and so somehow people thought that a magic wand would be waved and suddenly within a day. I mean, it's not unusual for projects like that to take a while, especially under the funding constraints of the CBI. So what has happened is that I think the high school project, the cultural center project, which involves much bigger than just a cultural center. I understand it involves even a small hotel and some other things. Those projects are going to be public purpose, I forget the name of it, public purpose projects or whatever, funded with these people, with the developers actually going into the market and getting citizenship by investment sales to fund the project. So that the government has had to be very creative with how it goes about doing public projects because of the fall off in actual funding. So spreading it out again to individual developers is going to bring that program itself back up, because you have more people out there selling under the new system, the new better organized and more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not hidden away like we had under the prison project, and more inclusive and open for you to see. But the government is finding more creative ways to fund capital projects, because the capital projects are needed. Not only were they promised, and you have to deliver on your promises if you're going to get reelected, but they have to be done. The country needs them. These are good projects. These are not just makeshift like a prison. That's a project that you may not need quite as well. All these are much needed projects. So the government is doing everything it can, and some of it was discussed in the budget. And it'll be interesting to hear the Prime Minister in his wind-up at the end of the week speak more specifically about the projects and when they're going to start and what is they're going to cost and so on, and where the funding is going to come from. That funding that you see in the budget is not enough to fund all of these projects. So clearly money is coming from elsewhere, and that you will get more information on.
And what I think is very important to point out as well is, though we may not have a physical hospital in place as yet, and a lot of these other BHS might not have gone vertical as yet, but a lot of money was spent over the last fiscal year in the improvement of existing infrastructure as well.
Good
that
point.
We have in place.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Excellent
So
point.
the CT machine.
I'm so happy you said that, because before the budget address today, the government did a great job of, I think Jamal was the man who was hosting it. He had a lot of video stock showing what had been taking place. I mean, I was quite impressed. A lot of the stuff that I wasn't even aware of, and they showed in the existing JNF hospital. Prime Minister spent a fair amount of time speaking about it today, and about the roof and the leaking, and about having 8 buckets
Right.
just to catch water. I found that very funny, but true. And so what he was really saying to the people today is, look, even though we are doing this new hospital, which is going to be much more appropriate and much stronger and much needed, we haven't forgotten that the existing facility needed input, including putting in top quality equipment and putting in air conditioning and
Acquisition of ambulances.
exactly. So it's not as if everybody's sitting back waiting for the big event. A bunch of small things are taking place, all building towards that big event. There's continuity and relevance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Ricky is right. I mean, the government has a lot of work on improving school plans. As you know, schools are tough environments. Kids beating on walls and windows and bathrooms and switches and so forth. And the government has invested significant amounts of money in making sure that those plans are improved. I know, for example, in the upcoming year, they have a massive project to do with upgrading of the electrical in schools. Our schools have become places where we expect a lot more devices, computers and so forth to be plugged into the walls and in our labs and so on. So yes, a lot of money has been spent on improving the facilities in our schools and hospitals and so forth, CT scan and all those kind of things. So the money that has been spent so far, I think, has been very well spent, but I think people are still looking forward to those big projects, the
Absolutely.
New Basti High School, the hospital project and so on, coming on stream.
And while he didn't speak specifically to digital transformation, he spoke about this public sector transformation today, which is where I think I want to pull you in here on now, because he really made a point of emphasizing that the digitization of government is just something that is inevitable.
Yeah.
We're going to have to make sure that things like our land registries or access to digital IDs, the AIDs we have coming on stream very
Right.
soon, all of these things are in place if we really want to move forward into the future. And not just that, but to be the sustainable island state we are moving towards becoming. What can you share with us from your point of view? Because you are the Chief Digital Transformation Officer. What insights can you offer us in regards to that?
Right. So the digital transformation program that is being undertaken by the government is just part of the overall sustainable island state agenda. It's about sustainability. Again, so the three major objectives of the digital transformation program in the government are as follows. Improving efficiency. Government can serve the public more efficiently, right? That is to say, more quickly and at lower cost, right? All of the paperwork can be gotten rid of, and we can provide systems that allow our citizens, whether they're here or abroad, to access government services. Secondly, it is really to improve accessibility. And that is to say, for persons who are here in St. Kitts, residents of St. Kitts and Nevis, but also those who are living abroad, but people who are differently abled, people with visual, hearing, and other kinds of impairment and so on, and disabilities. The systems that we are developing take into consideration that we have to be inclusive of all of those kinds of populations. And lastly, it is really to add to the growth of the economy, right? By creating businesses that support what government is doing, training people who will create their own businesses to provide services to both the government and to the private sector. But critically important, if I can just mention at a top level, if you want to go into them more deeply, you can, but the EID project, that is a digital identity project. This is a mechanism which is going to assist our citizens, whether here or abroad, in accessing government services, but also being able to perform transactions with their own private sector institutions, such as a bank, and having a basis to say that this is me, irrefutably, right? One of the reasons why when you go to a bank you have to offer 2 pieces of ID, it is because there is an admission that no form of ID that we have right now is so rock solid as to stand on its own. So you need to cross-reference and so on and so on. So that's important. We are also thinking of developing platforms like an online passport application platform, so our citizens abroad can apply for their passport online. We're also talking about a platform so that young people and people of all ages, resident here, resident abroad, can make application for their business licenses online and pay their taxes and so on online. Some of that is already happening, as you know. So it's really about empowering people, giving them the wherewithal to participate in whatever government is doing, accessing government services, but also, providing a platform whereby people can develop their own businesses around. And lastly, as a part of all of that, is doing the relevant legislative transformation as well. So we have to change our laws to suit. For example, we are going to have to get into the idea of digital signatures, so that if people are transacting electronically, then people have got to be able to sign documents electronically as well. So we can get into some of that a little later, but I want to stop there for now.
Okay.
Eboni, one of the things that came out to me while Nigel was talking was Nevis. There was an interesting development today, I found, that the Prime Minister took ownership of his responsibility, which I'm sure he does all the time, but it came across clearly in his presentation, which is something that Prime Ministers have been criticized for in the past, of not remembering that you are Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, and that you're ushering Nevis down a pathway of almost complete autonomy. Well, today the Prime Minister spoke about 2 projects which the federal government is keen on, is actively involved with, is supporting in various ways, which I'm sure more detail will come out later. And one, of course, is the energy project, help me there.
Geothermal.
The geothermal energy project, which we've heard a lot about for many years. And you heard the Prime Minister speaking about actual operationalizing of the new wells and all that, with a company having been recruited out of Iceland or some, forgive me again if I don't have it right.
I think it was Iceland.
But the point is that money is coming from Caribbean Development Bank with guarantees and other necessary documentations from the federal government. He also spoke about the Vance Emery internationally. Well, I would see, he basically said, we are going to have 2 international airports. We already have, because people, once you're flying directly to an airport, go through immigration, go through customs, it's an international airport. So the Vance Emery, which was fairly quiet,
it doesn't function the way it should have in the past.
The Prime Minister is working in the background to help the Premier achieve his objective and his government's objective to get that airport expanded and up and operating at this optimum level. These are two very important projects for Nevis and for the Federation. And I think the Prime Minister did a really good job of making that point today. And I want to commend him and the Nevis Island administration for working together, because it is necessary. The other issue, which is I'm sure you will hear lots of it during the debate coming, especially from the other side, is about public debt. You know, it's a bad thing to have debt. There's a certain prime minister who had a comment about debt once, which hit the news all over. He said, "Debt, my whatever." That may have sounded a little irresponsible at the time, but it's because he was trying to make the point, 2 points. Debt which is well directed, debt which is money well spent, is worth it. And 2, you can fix debt down the road as long as you have a plan to move the debt back down to where it's sustainable. And I think those 2 points were made today, especially the issue about money's well spent. Earlier, Eboni, I think you raised the issue of the prison project with the abuse and the perception of gross corruption and so on that took place back then that hurt. That was clearly public debt that was not well directed. What we have to make sure is that every dollar spent, and I just spoke about efficiency just now, more and more you have to do more and more with less. When I was a minister, I used to, that was a theme that I said, we have to do more with less. Because back then, I mean, I looked at what was made available to tourism today, and even though they're not happy, it's a tremendous amount of money compared to what we used to get when I was minister. And I could tell you, it took a long time before permanent financial secretaries understood the need to invest in tourism and what the returns are, the impact, the economic impact in the bigger sense. So we've come a long way. And even he mentioned today the music festival. I remember fighting numerous battles, Nigel was there, against financial secretaries as well, trying to justify why we should be bringing events like that up to a certain level and beyond. Again, because of the importance of what we call event tourism and sports tourism and entertainment tourism. So I really felt that the budget today covered just about everything, and I was glued to the television. I mean, I didn't go to the actual parliament, but I looked. It's the first time I've looked at ZIZ for so long in one sitting. I really enjoyed the presentation today.
I just want to back up Ricky on the fundamental point he's making about strategic debt, right? And in that regard, I want to speak to the geothermal, right? I was once Minister of State in the ministry responsible for that subject matter. So he's right. We've been having those discussions for quite some time, since as far back as 2007, right? It's 18 years now, and we haven't really moved as far as we ought to have. But I think the Prime Minister's interest in supporting that project has to do with the value it brings to the overall situation for St. Kitts and Nevis. Energy is one of the most important costs for the government. Important in the sense that we can't do without it, but it's also one of the most expensive things for the government to do in terms of buying energy and then subsidizing the cost to,
which he mentioned today.
Right, to the consumers, which he again mentioned today. And that is one of those critical important social programs. So when we think about making the energy sector sustainable, we really have to begin to think about renewable energy. And the geothermal project in Nevis, if it is as promising as we have heard, as it has been made out to be, it is really, it really makes all the sense in the world to make the investment, incur the debt, because in the long run, we are going to benefit from low cost of energy, right? And that is going to power businesses. It's going to give people in their homes a lot more wiggle room so that they could have money for other things and so on. So that to me is one of the most exciting things about what the government is doing and to me, one of the most important projects for incurring debt, or justifiable.
Not asking you to give an exact figure, so that's very difficult to do, but sometimes people hear these conversations and they're lofty conversations. In real terms, if we get this geothermal project off the ground, what do you suspect the average person would really see in terms of savings from that?
I don't want to say too much about that, but I can say to you that, first of all, we have to take into account what is the real cost that consumers like us should be paying. So, someone like myself, I pay like $450, $500 per month for electricity. I should have been paying maybe $1,000 based upon what I consume. I am paying that little because of what the government is giving me as subsidy. So what I expect in the future is that rather than my bill being in real terms in the area of $1,000 per month for electricity, I expect it to be more like half of that, if not 30%.
Without the subsidies?
Without subsidies at all. And so even if the government were to put in some subsidy on that, you expect, rather than paying $500, to pay maybe $300 or $250, as the case may be. And I suspect it can go much lower because the government is making, or intends to make, a huge investment, maybe $150 million, you know. That's a figure I've heard. Millions of dollars have been invested in the past. But that should last us for a very, very long time. There is, from my own understanding of that, a very low recurrent cost to the project. Of course, you'll need parts and so on. You'll need to upkeep what your machinery is. But having invested in drilling those wells and so on and being able to tap into that energy for many, many years to come, we can reap benefits for many, many years to come. And so, to me, it makes absolute sense.
In addition to not having to deal with the reality of fluctuations in the global oil price and so on.
Right.
Because that affects everything else. We need the goods to come here. They need to be transported to the business. Everybody has to recoup their costs somehow.
Right. So you have introduced another important concept, that the price can remain stable. We know for certain that oil prices are going to go up. They may come down a little bit, but they're also going to go right back up and go beyond where they are right now. So we have an opportunity to get energy at a very stable price for many years into the future.
One of the problems with the geothermal project that has obviously slowed progress is the high capital cost needed to get it off the ground. The testing, the purchase of the right technology and so on. And it's a fairly new industry that you know, everybody has a slant on it. Everybody has some kind of expertise that they want to sell you. But the problem is exciting in the sense that it's also the problem that to me is most exciting, the fact that it's such a small population in Nevis. So you're spending all this money per capita, and then you end up with a beautifully low-cost, recurrent, alternative source of energy, which you could never regain the value just through the small consumers in Nevis. So you have to sell it somewhere else. You got us run on the sea cable to St. Kitts and beyond.
Yep.
And that to me is the most exciting part of it, if that is the direction we're going. I've heard that that's where we're going, but the reality is that Nevis geothermal project will be able to supply many, many, many thousands of people across the region once you put the right on the sea cables and so on to connect. And so you begin to now get the proper return on investment, and you find more investors wanting to invest because it now has a much larger market. And that to me is exciting. I'll be curious to hear the Premier and the Prime Minister continue to speak about where they're going with this.
When we talk about before we move on to the issue of water, because I want us to touch on that as well, before we move off of this, we are in Nevis. What does the relationship now between the federal government and NIA say to you as former ministers of government? You sat there and you would have seen some of the dynamics between there, because normally if nobody from NIA sits in the federal government, that has not been the case until you had the coalition of 7 years ago. We see this now, but we see a level of cooperation that we have not seen in the past. What does that indicate to you?
Yeah, so having been in the cabinet for 10 years, from 2004 2015, from my own understanding, there was always some kind of relationship between the federal government and the NIA. I'm aware that, for example, when Mr. Parry was Premier in Nevis, there were many projects that him and the Prime Minister, Dr. Douglas, worked together on. Of course, that relationship kind of came full circle when Patrice Nisbet became Attorney General in the government, and so there was more direct representation for the things that needed support from the federal government in Nevis. So this relationship between the federal government and the NIA, I think it's a natural extension of that. I think in years to come, it will become the natural thing for people to see this working relationship between the NIA and the federal government, because the federal government serves the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Nevis, to be precise, is to be included in that. So I think that there really ought to be a relationship between those two governments, irrespective of who leads the government in Nevis. But I believe that what I'm getting out of this relationship more particularly is that there are particular things in Nevis, such as the energy project, in which the government has a federal interest because it represents such a great hope for sustainability in the future. And I think that they're going to find projects like that going forward to work on and to find common ground around.
What about water now? Let's talk about water, because he spent some time talking about the water situation, the common desalination plants, the drilling that has been taking place. Water has been a sore spot for a lot of people for a very long time when they can't turn on their tap and get water when they want to get their water. What does the focus towards getting these water projects off the ground next year say to you?
Well, you know, it occurred to me that I was listening to the minister responsible, Minister Maynard, speaking on a radio interview, I think the week before the budget, so it must have been last week or week before. And he was making the point that, you know, we could spend the money on housing more than we spend in it, and then have no water to put in the houses. It's like sending a kid to school all dressed up nicely in the best clothes, but he don't have any money to buy lunch. Because you need lunch. You need the school attendance, but you need lunch. Well, you need to have water if you're going to have a quality of life. You know, if you're going to be able to run a business, if you're going to be able to do, you know, healthy living. So water, the point is made. I mean, Prime Minister today started off, he said, well, this is politics. And, you know, I have to mention the Labour Party put me here. And I'm very grateful. He was saying thank you to all the people that did. And he said, this is politics. Well, what is politics is water now. I mean, you and me know that in Antigua, for instance, our next favorite island, water was a massive
Still is.
issue in the last election and the one before and the one before and the one before. And it's so important that the government invests in sustainable projects such as desalination plants to keep water in the pipes 24 hours. It's a standard that the average man and woman expects. And if you show lack of concern and lack of attention to that need, you do it at your own peril. And so I want to say that today I was really looking to the Prime Minister to speak about what is the status of these projects. And it seems as if things are going very well in the right direction, and I hope that it can be sustained.
Maybe I can add a word or two to that. Ricky has said it. People's expectations have improved. The housing stock has increased. More homes and people have their washing machines, their nice bathrooms and so on. So water is in higher demand. There's more need for water. And I think that people just feel that, I mean, this is a problem that government should solve, and they're going to have to rely on government to solve it. And so
they don't want to pay any more.
well, that's one of the important things that we should really talk about. I'm not making any suggestions as to price increases, but I mean, we've been paying the same rate for water for all these years. It's certainly not the real cost or the true cost for the water, but nonetheless, I think that the next year or two, I think, bode well for more sources of water becoming available to the public. I know we have a desalination plant that should become operational very shortly. That should produce some few millions of gallons of water
2 million.
per day. I think 2 million gallons of water per day. But I think they're also prospecting for new sources of water in St. Paul's and Saddles and other places around the country. That to me is fabulous. And if we can get rid of this water problem once and for all, that would be good. It doesn't mean that we won't ever have problems. I'm sure there are going to always be issues from time to time. But if we can get this problem behind us in a large way, you know, I think we will have done something for
Because
the
the
public.
reality is, and it's not just here again, these are things that we're facing across the region. Rainfall has been declining, and St. Kitts and Nevis has been very reliant on its groundwater.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate with the Bastille Aquifer and other
Yeah.
sources of water. Antigua doesn't have that. We solely rely on rainfall. If there's no rain, there's
Right,
no water. If Butterworth's
right.
Dam is empty. So we also have to be responsible, and I think this is part of it. I don't know, discussions like this should really let people understand how privileged they are. People may not want to hear this, you may not like hearing it, but it's the truth. We're very privileged here in that we've had a lot of these things. The cost, as you mentioned, that we've been able to enjoy them at. But we have a larger population now. We have to have the responsibility of conserving, especially as we look forward to sustainability.
I think, Eboni, that one of the points which we mustn't miss is the point that was being made today repeatedly, that no investments were made in these basic essentials of water and electricity over the period of time that his predecessors were in office. And that these kinds of utilities need continuous attention. They need ongoing investment. They need sustainable attention. Whoever is in government, anybody going into government should understand that supplying water in the pipes of citizens and giving a reliable supply of electricity at an affordable cost is going to always be a need and will always be a political issue. And it's up to the government of the day to make sure that they keep the projects moving forward and updating them, modernizing them, and making them more efficient in delivery and so on at the best possible prices. And don't ignore at the political peril, because these are things that need to be done on an ongoing basis, because there's always increasing demand, as Nigel said. Every time a new home is built, there's more demand for water. Every time a child goes from being a baby to being a young child, there's more demand for water, you know. And so it's important that agriculture, because even though you can't, it's been very clear, you cannot depend on the rain supply only for agriculture. You have to have irrigation. Where's the irrigation going to come from? It's going to come from storage, but it's also going to come from wherever you can get it at the best possible price and the most quickest delivery. So it is an important point that every government, no matter who is prime minister, no matter who is in the cabinet, you cannot ignore water or electricity. If not, you do so at your own peril.
Basic needs of the people that we have to get by on and survive. We're going to take a short break and we'll come back to a conversation about the 2026 budget and matters arising from. One of the things I would like us to have a conversation about when we get back is crime in St. Kitts and Nevis. It has been on the decline. It is something that we don't hear anybody talking about anymore, but I feel is worth a few minutes of conversation this evening if we're talking about what is to happen in 2026. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Big news from Office Machines Limited, your trusted Xerox distributor. We are proud to announce the launch of our brand new sales and marketing division. Join us for the grand opening ceremony on Thursday, December 11th at 4:30 p.m. right at the corner of Keon and Market Street opposite the Salvation Army. Here's the deal. In-stock machines at VAT day prices. That's 25% off plus zero VAT at launch. Enjoy 25% off all December long. And yes, zero VAT on both VAT days. Plus, refreshments and extended hours at launch and on VAT days to make your shopping experience even better. Our machines are powered by Xerox Connect Key Workflow Central apps. Smart, efficient, and built for success. Don't miss it. Office Machines Limited grand opening on December 11th at 4:30 p.m. Office Machines Limited, your future in print starts here.
back. We're in our final moments here on our discussion of the 2026 budget. Well, the budget debate hasn't started yet, but the budget address was made today. It was very interesting, very well thought out. We all agree here on this panel at any rate, and realistic. I think that's the word that everybody's taking away from it. Aspirational, perhaps, but realistic it was. Didn't leave us with any promises made that we know that cannot realistically be kept, or any goals that cannot be met. That's most important. But coming back now, I wanted just to have a conversation about crime in these moments that we have. A drastic reduction in crime, especially homicides in St. Kitts and Nevis over the past year or so. A lot of work has gone into that. Investment, again, in the resources available to the police force or armed forces, the establishment of a citizen security secretariat. You would have sat in government, both of you, at a time when the homicide rate was perhaps at its highest, not a very comfortable place to sit. What do you feel now looking at the turnaround and the numbers that we're seeing now?
Well, I want to say that one crime is one crime too many, but I think we also have to appreciate that the significant strides that the government has made in reducing crime is very much welcome, because any life saved is a precious life. As you said, while we were in government, crime, particularly homicides, were very problematic. And I think now in retrospect, I can say perhaps there are some techniques which this new administration has brought to the fore in terms of their crime fighting strategy, which has resulted in the success that we're seeing. I know the government has approached Dr. Drew, the Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, has often spoken about crime as being a health issue. And perhaps that is the approach which has helped in this case. But I do feel that investment in training of our people, investment in equipment, investment in relationships with organizations throughout the region and the world, and just going about talking to our people, getting our people to understand that crime is everybody's business, I think that has been a critically important part of it. I think people have gotten tired of playing this game, football, political football, with the issue of crime. And there were those who were in opposition while we were in government, who took a lot of pride and pleasure in talking about crime and so forth. But I think that we've come to a point where we can say that we hope that things would just continue improving, at least moving in the right direction, because when we talk about sustainability, crime is a very important part of that. If we are going to grow the tourism sector and all those important sectors of the economy that we've talked about, if we are going to get the young men and women to remain alive and well, to help to contribute in whatever sector, whatever things they're interested in, that's going to be critically important going forward. So kudos to the government, to the Minister of Minister of National Security, and all those people whom he has worked with him, Chief of Police, advisors, etc., who are doing an excellent job in just bringing an understanding as to what is needed in terms of our crime fighting approach.
Yeah, I think crime was very scary to the public at large. On the question of homicides, the amount of it was gang-based and drugs-driven, and it was seen as those bad people over there killing each other. And what are we going to do to intervene to get them to stop killing each other? Today, in listening to the various speeches and even some of the public education programs on radio and TV, you realize that the approach has been much more suitable to the problem. And there's a lot of good things that have taken place to grow the quality of life in ways that people realize that crime doesn't pay on a sustainable basis. and that there are other options available, education-wise and so on. I mean, some of the things that I've been hearing have just been fascinating, with incarcerated young men getting a chance to learn and take exams in school and to do things that they had never had a chance to do before.
At Christmas time.
And that really, there's hope. So the Prime Minister says all the time, as Minister of National Security, that it's not a one-man show. It's a village. It takes a village. And I commend all in that particular role who have made this, get us to this point. But obviously, the risk is still there because young people are still abusing drugs. Some young people are still making mistakes, poor choices. There's still some guns around. And the problem never ends overnight. But if the entire country continues to grow in terms of giving people opportunities to improve themselves and to improve their quality of their livelihoods, you'll find a much more equitable society where there's less gap between the haves and the have-nots, and the government is more fair in its approach to giving interventions to people who need it most, and so on. So I'm very optimistic, listening constantly now for the last couple of years and seeing the results. It's not by accident. It cannot be. It has to be something good is taking place, and we got to pray and hope that the goodness continues to have the positive impact.
I want to ask a question. It might seem like an obvious one, but you mentioned politicization of crime, but crime is not the only issue that's been tragically politicized. What is the danger, the real danger of politicizing issues that really are national issues where we should be bonding and coming together, politics aside, to find solutions to?
Well, to my mind, one of the great dangers of politicizing crime is that rather than having an all-hands-on-deck approach to the resolution of the issue of crime, you are likely to have people who are sitting on the sidelines, almost taking pride and pleasure in the continuation of the scourge of crime in the country. There is always that. You can also have a situation where people can be incentivized, directly or indirectly, to get themselves involved in criminal activity. So it's very, very dangerous. Any one of us can be on the receiving end, of crime. I know that over the last 20 years, we've had a lot of young people who have lost their lives, and older people as well, mostly local people, but I also know of visitors, tourists, and so on. People who would have gone to Great Britain, came back on retirement and trying to enjoy the last years of their lives, and tragically got killed in their homes. Crime is devastating to any society, to any people, and therefore there should be some issues where we can, where we should really agree to come together, to work together to resolve those issues, and crime is certainly one of them. There's so many other things that we can politic about, but when it comes to crime, I think we ought to come together around those issues.
Eboni, the interesting thing is that I was just looking here for what national security budget, recurrent budget is 84.1 million. I think probably only education is higher than that. It's even higher than health. Health is 83.8.
Which actually took a dip from last year.
Right. It would be interesting to see if national security takes a dip anytime going down, if this continues. I mean, so is it that with less of a certain type of crime fighting to do, you have more of another type of socialization and other
interventions?
Other integrated approaches.
Rehabilitative
programs. What will be the cost? So people generally expect that budget to be high. It was rising rapidly. I remember it going up. 10 years ago, it was probably 2/3 of what it is today. And 5 years before that, it was half of what it is today. So crime has taken up crime fighting, which is most of what national security is, even though national security is other things. National security budget has grown perhaps at a faster rate over the years than any other budget. And I hope that it's not money being wasted. We've seen good results, but is it efficiently being done? Stuff being done just because money is there or not? I hope not. I'm sure the people listening to me will say, no, we want more money. Everybody wants more money to do more things, but which is it that is giving the results? And that's what you need to focus on, where you're getting most effective impact.
So, gentlemen, we're in our last minutes here, and I wish we had more time, but who knows? We have a week of this to go through. Perhaps we can have another conversation before the year is over, after debates are done, to see what our views on what comes out of it is. But what are your key takeaways from what took place today? What do you think we should be looking forward to in 2026? What do you think the government should be doing? If you had the ear of those in the government over the next 12 months, based on some of the figures that we're seeing and just beginning to have an opportunity to digest, what would you say to them?
Well, I think the government should continue to be very realistic. The government has to take account of what's happening in every sector of the economy, in fact, those major sectors of the economy. The government has to take cognizance of what is happening to the CBI program, and although there is some hope that that is going to increase markedly over the next couple of years, we have got to begin to adopt an approach that we have to live within our means, and we have to find a way to put money aside for the future. I am very concerned, generally speaking. This is not just about this budget, but I'm always a bit concerned about the sustainability of what activities the government is undertaking. Those social programs, whatever they are we making sure that we can sustain them over the long run? We have civil servants who are retired, who are depending on their pensions. We have education, the education of our young people to secure. We always have to have funding available for those things. Infrastructure development is very important, because in the absence of good infrastructure, tourism and those other important sectors of the economy are going to flounder. So I think the government has to keep a level head. It has to understand that we can't always be about the show, in as much as it has particular promises to fulfill. We have got to begin to look at the long term. And so we have to make sure that we're able to pay civil servants pensions down the road. We're able to keep educating our people. We are able to invest in crime fighting, provide for the security of the state, invest in infrastructure, roads and water, electricity and so forth. Those kinds of things are the kinds of things that we have to begin to think about long-termly. And that may mean speaking directly to people about where we are, the level of social programs that are being carried forward, and the kinds of strategies that the government has to use to be able to get more people to be employable or into their own businesses, grow the economy so that the government can sustain whatever it's doing at this time. That's where I'll stop.
As we speak about growing the economy, what is growth, Eboni? Growth is driven by investment, by consumption, and by exports. Our export is tourism. Our consumption is local people and visitors consuming based on what funds in their pockets, and that money comes primarily from economic activity. But investment can be public direct investment, or it can be private sector investment. What I take away from today is that we have both happening, and that enthusiasm and optimism are words that you can begin to speak about for 2026 when it comes to investment and ultimately consumption and export. In the export area, there are 4 areas that drive tourism export. One is education tourism, which I spoke about earlier. Another one is yacht and private aircraft sector, the stayover sector, and the cruise sector. All 4 are moving in the right direction. and I commend the minister and her people for that. So, investment from private and public sector. We went through some of the projects earlier with the public sector and the private sector. You have the large Friars Bay Hotel. You have the marina, safe harbor marina people, and so on. The picture going forward looks very promising. That's what I take away from today, with good reason.
And you know, if I had to add anything to that, or to leave with the public, it would basically be, in again, realistic budget is one of consolidation. We recognizing, look, the days of the CBI, and as we used to know it, are over. But is it all gloom and doom? Absolutely not. We have a lot that we still have in hand that we can look forward to, but we all have to play a role in being responsible with the resources that we have and how we use them going into the future. It's just as simple as that. And I don't think that's a difficult ask of anybody. It's what we do on a daily basis in our homes. So what is it to ask ourselves to extend this to our communities and our country? St. Kitts and Nevis is a place where we are very patriotic, we are very nationalistic, and this is the time, if there has ever been a time in the history of this country to put country first, it is now. I think this is how we're going to wrap up this discussion for this evening. Again, I want to thank everybody who was listening on radio, who was watching on television or streaming online, those members of the diaspora who are always tuned into what is happening at home. We always welcome you to discussions like this. Perhaps we'll see what happens over the course of the next week, but I would really like if we can meet up after the debates are over and have a conversation, because this is just where it starts. The presentation of the budget is just the horse bolted out the gate. We still have the furlongs to go. We have to get to the finish line, and this is going to happen over the next few days. So we urge you to tune in. ZIZ, of course, is going to be carrying the budget debates live. They start at 10 a.m. I encourage you to follow, to pay attention. It is important for all of us to be very involved in what is taking place in our country, and it starts with knowing what is happening around us. So until we meet again, I'm Eboni Brandon. I wish to thank my guests for joining me this evening. Ricky Skerritt, former Minister of Tourism, and of course Nigel Carty, a former Minister of Education and Agriculture. He's also a Chief Digital Transformation Officer in St. Kitts and Nevis at the moment. Till we meet again, have a good evening.